Open your Bible to Exodus 28. Read it. Now think about what day your church meets on. The fourth commandment doesn't say Sunday. It doesn't say whichever day feels right. It says the seventh day, Saturday, is the Sabbath of the Lord your God, not Sunday. For 2,000 years, most Christian churches have gathered every week on a day their own commandment never names. One of those two things had to change. It wasn't the commandment. Here's where the trail starts, and it starts with Jesus. Luke 4:16 says that when Jesus came to Nazareth, as his custom was, he went into the synagogue on the Sabbath day. Custom means routine, not a one-time visit, but every week on the seventh day, not Sunday. Clue 2 comes from Paul, the man who wrote most of the New Testament. Acts 17:2 records that in Thessalonica, as his custom was, he reasoned with the Jews for 3 Sabbaths, again the seventh day, again described as his habit, not an exception. So what does the actual commandment say? Exodus 20 verses 8 through 11, the longest of the 10 commandments, 4 full verses, more detail than do not murder or do not steal ever gets. It says to remember the Sabbath and keep it holy, that 6 days are for labor, and that the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord your God, not the first day. The seventh, Genesis 2:2-3, pushes the origin back further than Sinai altogether. God rested on the seventh day, blessed it, and made it holy at creation, before there was an Israel to give a law to. Comment below, yes or no. Has your church ever explained why it meets on a day the fourth commandment never names? So when did Sunday enter the story? The first surviving document that names the day called Sunday outright and describes a full Christian worship service, readings, prayers, communion, an offering for the poor, is Justin Martyr's first apology, written around AD 150, more than a century after the resurrection. Earlier writings use a vaguer phrase, the Lord's Day, in Greek Kyriak Hemera, found in the Didache and in a letter from Ignatius of Antioch around AD 110. But neither spells out which day of the week it means. That's a real gap worth being honest about. It isn't that nobody gathered on the first day before Justin Martyr. It's that no surviving document names it Sunday until he does. By 321, Sunday had a legal backer, the Emperor Constantine, who issued the first civil Sunday rest law, ordering magistrates and city dwellers to rest on what his own decree called the Venerable Day of the Sun. This is the same Constantine whose household collapsed in scandal a few years later. He had his son Crispus executed and his wife Fausta killed in a superheated bathhouse. Historians differ on whether she suffocated or was scalded, but every ancient account agrees it was neither quiet nor accidental. A sun-worshipping emperor is the man who put Sunday into Roman law, now the conservative case, because it deserves to be heard in full. Churches that keep Sunday don't build their argument on Constantine. They point to the New Testament itself. Acts 27, where the believers at Troas came together to break bread on the first day of the week. 1 Corinthians 16:2, where Paul tells the Corinthians to set aside money on the first day of every week. And Revelation 1:10, where John says he was in the Spirit on the Lord's Day, a phrase that by the early 2nd century Christian writers consistently used for the first day of the week. D.A. Carson's landmark 1982 study, From Sabbath to Lord's Day, gathers several evangelical scholars around one argument. The resurrection, happening on the first day, doesn't just commemorate an event. It transforms the whole Sabbath principle into a new day. Here's the honest pushback. Acts 27 describes one farewell gathering, not a standing weekly law. 1 Corinthians 16:2 is about setting money aside privately at home, not a commanded worship service. And the Lord's Day in Revelation never says, in so many words, that the Sabbath has moved there. Every one of these texts supports a Sunday practice. None of them contains an explicit command transferring the fourth commandment onto a new day. That transfer, if it happened through custom and later tradition, not through a verse anyone can point to. The Catholic Church itself has never claimed otherwise. In 1893, the Catholic Mirror, published under Cardinal James Gibbons, ran a series stating plainly that the Bible commands the seventh day, and that the Church, by her own authority, moved the observance to the first. Colossians 2:16, where Paul tells believers not to let anyone judge them regarding a Sabbath, is often read as proof the Sabbath no longer matters at all, but the verse says not to be judged over it, which isn't the same as a command to move it to a different day. The Seventh-day Adventist movement picked up this thread in the mid-1840s. Joseph Bates, then James and Ellen White, read the same fourth commandment every other church reads, and concluded it still meant exactly what it said. None of this settles which day is correct. That isn't really the question this trail answers. What it does show is a gap, a specific 4-verse commandment that names one day, and a historical record showing exactly when and through whom common practice moved to another. Whether your church has ever walked you through that gap is worth asking. The commandment is still sitting in Exodus 20, unedited. What you do with that is yours to decide. If this is the kind of gap you want to keep finding, there's more like it waiting in your Bible. Subscribe if Exodus 28 just became part of how you read your own church's Sunday morning.